have quite a lot of room for a broader conversation with the room. So I'll quickly introduce the speakers, and then I will leave them introduce themselves more in depth, maybe. So we will first have a presentation on market demand for biochar carbon credits given by Arnaud de France from Puro. Then we'll have a session on data-driven crediting schemes for trustworthy and high-quality carbon removal credits by Carbonfuture with Marcel EICHLER. Welcome. Then a presentation on empowering communities by Circonomy, and the speaker is not yet here, but we will wait for him or her. And then we will have a session on de-risking the investment in biochar for carbon removal project by GECA Environnement with Melissa. Welcome. And finally, one on decoding the dynamics of biochar carbon credits with ACCEND and Paul Ferguson. Welcome. Oh, welcome. We are now complete, which is great. So before we kick off, just say a few words about this very key and important topic on carbon credits, which, of course, first of all, I would say can cover or be very different things, actually. When we look at the history of carbon markets and what units have been traded on these markets, we have very different things, from avoided emissions with projects on renewables or cook stove or these kind of things, avoided emissions based on the protection of ecosystems, forest, agricultural soils, and then even CCS project, for example. And now the new kids on the block, we could say, is CDR, of course, carbon removal, which is progressively entering these markets with a new kind of carbon credits, and with different, again, different kinds of CDR between temporary and more like permanent storage. Carbon credits are, we like them or not, but we need them. It is a key tool to enable cooperation between different actors. And this is emphasized again and again in the global conversation on climate, particularly the ongoing conversation on the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, 6.2 and 6.4, for those who follow a little bit this. And there's a lot of debate on how to go about this. And it's being delayed, actually, which is a pity, but we need a proper mechanism, mostly because carbon credits are also now, they have a trajectory, and it's a loaded concept, particularly in the public debate. Unfortunately, carbon credits can easily be conflated with poor offsetting that has happened in the past. And that has been largely evidenced over last year with the studies released by The Guardian and all the scrutiny that happened with the VERA standards. So all these are problematic news to move forward with carbon credits and markets, because of course there is a question of trust at all the levels, actually, of the value chain. Anyway, so this is where we are, and I guess with this session this afternoon, it's very interesting to look into the future and ask ourselves how carbon credits can evolve based on what drivers, and how we make sure that we can improve them and use them to, again, foster cooperation and increase the level of funding and that is bring into climate action at different level. So I won't be any longer than this, and I would like now to give the floor to Arnaud de France from Puro for the first presentation.
Thank you, Sylvain. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm going to stand up to try to keep yourself awake, but also myself awake. After the lunch break is a bit of a tough spot to have the presentation, an open one. Is everybody awake over here? So if yes, there is some livelihood over here. Very nice. Yeah, I have the tough spot, but that's fine. Yeah, so my name is Arnaud de France. I'm from a small city from north of France, Boulogne-sur-Mer. My last name cannot hide my origins. I live in Finland, and I've spent most of my career financing and investing in renewable energy projects, so carbon reduction projects. And it's been now 3 years that I work with Puro, together with the founders, to direct funding and commitments to negative emission projects. So we were the first one, and we will always be the first standard to have focused exclusively on negative emissions. And up to today, yeah, we have evolved in our business. I talk a lot to biochar projects. I talk a lot to biochar cork buyers. I talk a lot to investors in biochar projects. So I hope I can bring a lot of insights from all of my accumulated experience during those 3 years. I'll set the scene with some general background, but I really want to go into what is insightful and useful for you. And there will be some time allocated for questions at the end. So, well, the starting point, I guess there was some enough sessions over here about, I guess everybody here is convinced that biochar removes CO2 from the atmosphere. There is a beautiful natural process called photosynthesis that, you know, without human action will be released back to the atmosphere. And this beautiful pyrolysis process stabilizes the CO2, and then you can store it for a long time and credit this permanent removal with carbon credits. At Puro, in our certification system, each ton of CO2 removed is called a cork, CO2 removal certificates. So this is the value chain of the, well, simplified value chain you know, from projects to buyer of the certification projects for carbon removal. And in blue here, you see where Puro Earth is acting. So we are mostly a standard developer. So we have 5 standards that I will show in the next slides, and developing 2 new ones that I will explain also. And we offer the registry services to be able to help suppliers and buyers keep track of the negative emission that they transacted in a public registry. We have on the panel people representing different parts of the value chain. The service, in a nutshell, are the standard developments. And yeah, we have been endorsed by RORA since last year. We have the registry services, so very techy, but just a simple registry to have the full transparency of the transaction and the cork that are issued and the cork that are retired, sorry. The certification of the cork, so that's behind the development. There is all of the operation behind it, sending auditors and reviewing the reports to be able to help the quality of this carbon removal to be to the standard they should be. And we are majoritarily owned by NASDAQ. They have helped us also to develop a cork index to help with predictability of the price of the biochar corks, essentially. We have an initiative, Puro Accelerate, to help projects that are still in the design phase to get some traction with long-term cork purchase agreement from buyers or offtakes. And side services, we have a MyPuro kind of portal to help navigate in the transaction for buyers and suppliers, and the Puro Connect API. So connecting with the sales channel partner to make sure that there is efficient distribution for the carbon removal. But I won't bore you too much with the you know, services. These are the methodology to date. As insights from a lot of results for market surveys, buyers have been essentially focusing on biochar or excited about biochar. That's from the latest CDR FYI survey. I think it's 67% of the buyers that are planning to buy cork from biochar projects. So that's a big portion of the market overall in CDR. So that shows that there is a lot of attraction for biochar. Why that? Well, essentially, it is very reliable. It's a trusted carbon removal already. The permanence is also guaranteed, and there was an earlier session on the science about that. The impact also, well, so co-benefits and SDG alignments that can be linked to those projects and operations, and all of the benefits that we know because we sit in this exhibition center over here. The agricultural productivity, all of the remediation of contaminated sites, also sorbent for water treatment, even if some people have some debate about that, but I'm a believer of this, generates renewable energy and diverts organic waste from landfills. So it is something that's attracted to buyer. So I want to go quite quickly into how to get their interest. And of course, the number one thing that they are after, at least with our ecosystem, Puro ecosystem, is how close are the projects to be certified and match our methodology. So just a few reminders of what are needed to comply with the Puro methodology. It's a mix of strong pragmatism and a readable methodology, but at the same time trying to be at the highest quality standard for the biochar. We are already at our third version. We're maintaining and updating methodology based on the latest science. So our scientist has also reviewed the latest publication on the on the biochar permanence. So we are well equipped to keep and maintain high standard methodology about that. We pay a lot of attention to environmental safeguard, where the biomass is sourced. The emission control is very important for us to limit the pollutant, especially methane, in the process. The community engagement to make sure that there are no negative impact there, or the same with the biodiversity. And then it's how do we quantify the negative emission to make sure that they are as accurate as possible. So we have the precise calculation based on exact carbon content. We make sure that the projects they would not have happened without the corks. Still today, we operate in a voluntary carbon market. So buyers of carbon removal certificates do that not for fun, but kind of out of goodwill. So they want to make sure that the money they spend is not going to owners of a project that would have happened anyway, just to give them a little bit more, money, but making sure that their money is instrumental in enabling new projects and therefore maximizing the climate impact of each euro they spend. This is why the concept of additionality is important to us. And we're very much aligned with the ICVCM kind of requirement, and investment analysis is something that we require. We also look at the local climatic condition. We don't look at averages of averages to make sure that we have the most accurate kind of quantification. LCAs, the application of the biochar is super important to be able to guarantee the permanence of the carbon removal and make sure that there are no leakage. To the demand, and we have majority owners NASDAQ. It's a luxury. We're proud of being privately owned because we benefit for building efficient processes, and therefore the projects also benefit from efficient processes. We all have to gain. The same for the buyers, and luckily enough, we have patient owners that help us stay in our very niche positioning, which is purely carbon removal. As you know, it started very small, but we're staying there. They have the patience to let us build on what we, to develop the ecosystem we started 4 or 5 years ago. The price of the cork biochar, we have an index thanks to the NASDAQ team, and overall, the prices are stabilized around 128. So as you can see here on the curve, though there was a bit of a variation and the price increase of the cork, there was speculation that it would keep going up, but now biochar cork has stabilized around 128. It's a function of volume, it's a function of maturity of those contracts, but still it's a good indicator, and it helps suppliers or projects of biochar projects to build model based on this kind of a pricing. Offtake is the theme of today. Based on this demand, we know that our strong belief is that offtakes for corks, so carbon removal certificates attached to the projects, are super important. And why that? So what are they? So as I mentioned, they are long-term purchase agreements for the output of a project in general. This is what we call an offtake in project finance. So for biochar, we have, of course, the stream that is the biochar, the bio-oil, or what we call the byproduct. Puro focuses exclusively on the climate impact, not on the kind of biochar criteria or use beside the carbon contents and humidity factors, etc. The energy is the other output that can be transacted depending on the project design, and then the corks. But the biochar, as we maybe from what I hear still today in the conversation, the market is difficult to get long-term contracts for the buyers of biochars. There are new players helping to match biochar projects and buyers, but it's still difficult to get like 5 years offtake for your biochar. This is where CDR can be a powerful tool to help secure future cash flow and therefore help get the funding and get the projects off the ground. And this is where we want to focus on the cork, so CO2 removal certificates and the associated offtakes. The cork buyers overall, so in light blue, they are the overall cork buyer. They tend to prioritize spot transactions. So basically, they want to buy corks or carbon certificates, removal certificates after the audits and after the issuance. This is the majority of the market. It's overall growing from the dotted white line to overall the bigger one. So it's a positive trend. But there is still some smaller portion of buyers that are able to commit for longer term contracts. So those offtakes up to 5 years, sometimes 10 years, but it's still a minority, but it's growing. They understand that there is a need to secure future supply for carbon removal, as the awareness among buyers is spreading faster than the projects are being developed. So this is to help against their own procurement risk. Even smaller portion of those buyers are sometimes able to prepay for those offtakes. But it's a very small portion, but it's still also growing for the best of those projects that have already, well, we will go through some tips and criteria where you can perhaps apply for some sort of a prepayment for those offtakes. But it remains very rare. The majority of the transactions and the demand, they transact on spot. They don't really contribute to the funding. We really tried to contribute to this, but it is an early phase, and only a few intermediaries offer those prepayments. But it is very interesting because it is still growing, because they realize that intermediaries, they have more money to make if they buy in early versus on the spot. On the spot market, it's just a very tight margin, so it is still growing. And the trend is that more and more transaction on the prepayment side will happen, especially as projects mature. This is a bit of the more complex, again, focusing on the right side here, on the demand. There are a few enablers in the value chain, and so you can see it's a bit more complex than the simple one that I used earlier. And I want to break down a little bit on the list of intermediaries, because there are actually, who are those buyers and what are their drive to buy CDR? So I broke them down into different archetypes, and the first ones are the pioneer buyers, so end buyers, large companies that we all know. They're still very concentrated pool of buyers, and buyers alliances. So they offer offtake to attract capital and get the projects off the ground. They typically either develop their own resources internally to conduct due diligence and negotiate those transactions with projects, or then they can use consultants or other help, especially the new ones, the new entrants that don't have this capacity. They use a bit of the intermediaries that I will describe on the left side here. The intermediaries are very powerful. Like, as an insight for you, our revenues are growingly coming from these intermediaries. So we're noticing intermediation of the market. So moving slowly from direct transaction from a project to a buyer to actually have project aggregators, as we have here present in the panel. And also on the demand side, some kind of advisors or consultants that help source also on the demand side. Archetypes, the first one are all of those decarbonization platforms that offer carbon accounting services as a main thing to their corporate buyers. And because they know how many kind of ton of CO2 they emit, they also offer solutions to neutralize emission that company cannot reduce today, and therefore the corks. So they may have also ESG consultancy. So this is what drives them. They already have a customer base for the carbon accounting, and then they source from the crediting platform like Puro the carbon removal that are needed to offer to their clients. Another archetypes are the marketplaces, also linked to the APIs. Basically, it's enabling transaction by hosting either a marketplace or the API services to bridge the end buyer and the projects or the certification platforms. The brokers that procure and transfer, they charge a commission for this, so they help matchmaking, so to say, to save people's time against a fee. Then you have traders that buy more larger quantities and they sell them for financial profits. Sometimes they bundle it into portfolios. The traders over here are usually looking at a bit bigger volumes and they're quite tough to negotiate on price. Exchanges are overall providing structure for the infrastructure, the trading infrastructure, and some are exploring also offering some standard contract, like it's been the case for nature-based. So we hope to see this coming for CDRs as well when the liquidity comes in. And then the streaming companies that provide upfront capital in exchange of a percentage of the carbon credits. To seduce the demand side and be able to communicate about your certification process, how close are you from being compliant with our methodology or any methodology. This is a bit of the latest certification journey, whereby first we have quite automated questionnaires that almost automatically run, and then qualification with human interaction with some of our account managers to check the main point that the company is committed to have, to commit to Puro, to register the facility, sign the platform agreement, which is purely defining the rules, registering the facility, which is then to commit to exclusivity on the certification so that you don't end up one facility registered on different standards of certification to avoid the obvious double counting. Then there are preliminary assessments that we now run for companies that are not operating, but that can validate the design, or not validate, but be preliminary assessed from our team if the projects are not ready for the audit preparation. If the projects are ready already, they have operations and ready for audits, then we take care of everything already. Then we have, the audit happens as I cannot go back on, maybe it's okay. But that's roughly what the demand will ask for. How close is the projects to be certified by Puro, for example, or someone else. But a few tips, perhaps, and insights from what I learned interacting with a lot of suppliers and buyers. Be ready for the reviews. So what we see projects to get the most attention is to have a solid business fundamentals. So like financial models that provides profitability that's robust, because if you want to apply for a long-term purchase agreement, you need to be able to have a lower price for the cork certificates. So even like a 30% discount for offtake is not something absurd to consider, and see if you still have the profitability, and then maybe not optimize the profitability for your first facility, but at least get going, get things proved that you can do what you say you can do, and then scale. So this is where the cork price for biochar, fortunately, is quite predictable, as I mentioned with the index. So it gives a lot of tools for you to kind of test the business plan and see, if you can be attracted to a buyer. when the proof of concept is done, you get also so much more attention. So walk before you run approach, prove the technology on a smaller scale. In the beginning, for pilots, you may need different source of capital. You can't really rely on prepayments or buyers taking this development risk. This is not realistic, and you may stay stuck forever. The projects that have worked before they run, this approach paid off. We've seen projects that focused on really delivering on the pilot or a smaller scale, and then get their second operation larger with big commitments. Then a few more insights to conclude. Once those projects are proven the concept and they can show that they can absorb capital or commitments, then you become attractive to those intermediaries, because they see roughly after the concept is proven that the project has lands, the feedstocks, and the growth is quite predictable. Then you become way more attractive to them. And then the power of conditional commitments, so that you can try to negotiate conditional commitments from buyers to purchase, subject to receiving the final funding, and vice versa, to get the funding subject to receiving the commitments from the off-takers, because often it's a chicken and egg, but if you have conditionality in both, you may strike a deal. Clarify your ask to the off-takers, make it very simple. What is this commitment or investment? Where does it get you? Have the material ready, and we can help out with that. And that's it. I was almost on time.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arnaud, for this presentation. Right on time. I think we can now give an opportunity for one or two questions, if there are some, on this particular presentation, before we move on. Anyone with a question for Arnaud?
Thank you very much, Arnaud. I'm just looking at the carbon credit for biochar and the traceability. So you could purchase in advance.
So can you speak closer to the mic? I can't.
Sorry. If you buy like the carbon credits in advance, any company buy carbon credits in advance, what is the method to trace the biochar itself? Because obviously you need to put it in the ground to get the carbon credit. What is the method at the minute to trace this?
Yeah, I think we have good presentation about that coming, so I won't spoil the answer. But today, Puro at least relies on the contractual proof and confirmation of the use of the biochar. But there are other ways that can go a step, another extra step to be able to track where the biochar ends up. So I'll let our colleague from the Carbonfuture describe that. I don't want to spoil the answer.
Thank you. One more question, or are we good to move on? Okay, then.
Melissa has a question.
Sorry.
Great presentation. So this question came into my inbox a few times over the past few weeks, and we talked about the stability of the biochar pricing. Now, I received a few emails about some, I guess, intelligence, allied offset, quantum commodities, just to name a few, that, are much higher than that price. So is there an explanation? Is there a way that you can maybe put in relation those discrepancies for the audience?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So what you receive by email is a kind of result of expectations from projects that have, of course, the optimism bias that perhaps those high prices are doable based on reference transaction where they don't have all of the details, where you have a mix of byproduct contracted and the carbon removal, and it's very difficult to compare. So those news came probably from one of our listing that was generously displaying some projects with design phase. In Puro, we let the projects decide on what price they want to sell their credits. So we don't decide for them, and we've been quite flexible in letting them, have their display their expectation. And the newspaper have vividly kept track of that. So the Cork index and other data that will be showed later on are more concrete data because they are transaction data versus expectation data. So the high expectation versus the reality of the transactions.
Excellent. I think that was a good question and answer. Let's move on to the next presentation then. I'll give the floor now to Marcel from Carbonfuture.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I even postponed my lunch to stay awake for you. Sadly, it didn't really work. Still a little bit tired, but it's a pleasure to talk to you once again here in Nantes. I worked with Carbonfuture since 3 years now, and we managed to successfully support various producers, farmers, as well as biochar traders to set up their projects and connect them to, I would say, very prominent buyers in the CDR market. Well, I still need the pointer. Yeah, and today I want to take the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper in a, I would say, rather dry topic, which is about project verification and the carbon removal credit generation pathway, so to say. Of course, there are various institutions and checks and balances involved that are necessary in order to create a high-quality carbon removal credit. Yeah, and I basically want to take you along on this ride in diving a little bit deeper into this. First, I want to present our team, though. We were founded in 2020 in Freiburg, Germany, but we grew quite a lot from 4 people in 2020 until I would say 35 people, more or less now. And we have additional offices in Zurich, in Switzerland, and in San Francisco, US by now. So yeah, maybe let's go back to the topic and first explain a little bit why is carbon removal necessary. The science is clear. If we want to reach the 1.5 degree target, carbon removal is necessary in order to compensate for residual emission that will still take place in the future, and also to account for historical emissions that are already in the atmosphere. However, of course, this only works in combination with a steep reduction pathway. Either way, I don't want to focus too much on what I call the doomsday slide, and rather focus on solutions. But still, it is very important that we basically learn from the past and also from past mistakes that have been done in the voluntary carbon market. I mean, the carbon removal market or CDR market is a very young market. It basically, the differentiating factor is that you have a permanent sequestration of atmospheric carbon through either a biological or technical process, or both at the same time. I mean, these are only some of the most, I would say, prominent technologies that are available in the carbon removal market, but all of them are still very young. Like if you look at CDR FYI, for example, you can see that in 2022, these technologies only made up less than 0.001% of the entire voluntary carbon market. So it's a very nascent market, and I think it's very important that we learn from past mistakes that happened in the voluntary carbon market. And one clear learning is that we need very rigorous monitoring protocols and clear guidelines, transparency, a lot of data, and additionally also tracking. So in the case of biochar, what we mean by tracking, this could be, for example, following the flow of carbon. So what biomass basically goes in. It can be sensory data that you measure basically where the facility is. So what's the retention time in the reactor, what is the heat, what comes in, what goes out, but as well as the transportation of the biochar, maybe to a trader, but maybe also to a retailer, as well as proof of the carbon preserving application of the biochar. At Carbonfuture, we do this with a QR code-based tracking system, and also legal liability clause that needs to be signed, for example, by the farmer directly, that the biochar has been applied carbon preservingly. And basically only if all of these data points are tracked and validated, I would say you have the full transparency along the value chain when it comes to the carbon credit. Of course, specifically with the biomass tracking, we are not there yet, but we are very confident that we are getting there, I would say, in the near future. And to be climate relevant and scale this really fragile plan that we call the carbon removal market, it's of utmost importance that we establish transparent and secure pathways in order to create a carbon removal credit, really rule out any claim of greenwashing, and also make these different data points available to the buyer who's buying the carbon removal credit in the end. There has been a lot of misconduct in the past, but we really see a chance that we do things differently now that the carbon removal market is keeping up and stepping into the voluntary carbon market. So this is, I would say, a more difficult view that you see here. This is basically an ideal diagram from the Carbonfuture perspective of how the credit generation pathway should be. I mean, from our perspective, what entails a high-quality removal credit is that it's based on a methodology that was published by a recognized standard, be it Puro Earth, for example, or Carbon Standards International, that has undergone public consultation, was developed with various stakeholders and scientists, but that has also been checked by an independent third party, namely verification and validation body, or in short, VVB, who basically checks the monitoring protocols, and then additionally, so to say, the tracking part, but I will come a little bit later to this again. If you want to simplify it, it's basically the standard that makes the rules and that oversees the framework, the credit issuance, and it's the verification body that checks, so to say, and ensures that the rules are being followed according to the framework. So one step would be that the overall project plan of your biochar project is in line with the regulatory framework, project framework set out by the standard. And the second part is that the carbon removal claim that they actually make is conform with the specific regulations also set out by the standard. This used to be a very handish process, and this is also something that you can find in the avoidance market. And we believe that there should be a third institution, so to say, digital monitoring, verification, and reporting. So in short, DMRV. We offer such a service, and the idea is to automate the process to a certain extent, gather data automatically and make it available to standards, but also the VVBs. So basically a DMRV platform can gather all the data from different projects, pre-calculate the carbon removal, and make it available for the standard and the VVBs in a more automized process. And then, of course, on the left, you have the suppliers, who are basically the project proponents, set up a project, a biochar project in this case. Sometimes in the value chain, there's more than just a producer involved, but also a trader and a farmer. And on the other end, you have the buyer, who basically requires the utmost trust. And then, of course, linked to the standard, there should always be a public registry. And only if basically all these actors and institutions are involved, I would say you have the most trustworthy carbon removal credit in the market. So the idea of the DMRV system is basically twofold. One is to speed up the process by gathering sensory data and data along the value chain and making it available to VVBs. You can speed up the process. At the same time, it's also something that you can make directly visible to buyers, the chain of custodies, and so you can increase the overall trust of a carbon removal credit through being able to show this value chain and this tracking system via UI directly to potential buyers. So overall, I would say there are 5 pillars of a trustworthy credit. First, it's being backed up by robust science. It's additional, as Arnaud already mentioned. I will not go deeper into this. It's been independently quantified and certified with the standard and the third-party VVB, and you have transparent tracking and traceability that you can show, where you can show real-time or quasi-real-time data. Where we want to place us as carbon removal is by further integrating with the existing standards, especially for biochar, like Puro and Carbon Standards International. But at the same time, we offer a due diligence process to assess something like financial planning and how legit is a company that is engaging in the sales of carbon removal credits, while at the same time providing access to carbon removal markets. And the idea is really to have one interface, basically, where you can have multiple certification pathways via different standards, provide a platform to see the chain of custody, and make it as transparent to the individual buyer as possible. So, and I think we have a very neat competitive edge here. However, there are still certain bottlenecks and missing synergies that we are fighting with, and it's really, like, I would say the topic of the coming years is by getting on the table again, further align responsibilities and integrating the automated and digital data gathering process to an extent where you can really reduce also the time of certification. A lot of times this is a bottleneck, I would say, for many projects, that this process takes even longer sometimes than setting up production. That's it. I think I was even a little bit faster than I'm supposed to, but our presenter, moderator is happy.
No, that was perfect. Thank you very much, Marcel.
And yeah, if you have any questions, please go ahead.
Yeah, let's take 2 questions as well. Anyone want to jump in? Okay, one here. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Marcel. Jerome again. How long is the process to get a certification in general?
I mean, that's actually a question that can be better answered by the standard. So Puro in this case, we are trying to speed up the process, and we are currently integrating and trying to speed up the process by making data readily available. But I would say 3 to 6 months probably right now.
Yeah, and of course there is variance, and that depends on the a few factors. Of course, the availability of the auditors, if they have a huge amount of requests at the same time at the same location, that can be a bottleneck. So they are beefing up their teams to make sure that they're not ending up a bottleneck. That's one factor. Second is, you know, how the project has gathered the evidence that they needed so to have a successful audit. And thirdly is the actual results of the audits. If there are some, you know, misalignment to the methodology, of course, correcting that takes a little bit of time. But for the best in class, I think, yeah, the process can take less than a quarter.
Maybe one addition. My personal experience is that it also a lot of times depends on how long you have to wait for an audit appointment. I don't know if you would agree with this, but the VVB and audits, this is really like something that we perceive personally as a bottleneck at the moment.
Thanks. One more here.
Hi, Olivier from Quantum Commodity Intelligence. So I have a question for Marcel as well. Just curious, how long is the typical due diligence for your clients when they buy credits on your platform? Is it a long process, or can it be short? Does it differ a lot?
are you talking about the due diligence that we undertake for the project or the one that is undertaken by the buyer?
The buyer, yeah.
I cannot give you a clear answer because it varies quite significantly, to be honest. Like there are buyers that have a clear view of what they want, and they basically request data from us from the tracking and the due diligence process, and it's a decision of 2 weeks if they have a clear vision. But if you engage within an RFP process and basically they have their own system, so to say, to assess the quality of a carbon removal credit, that's a process that can take months, like up to 6 months, I would say, in the worst case scenario.
Also, if the buyers are looking for long-term contracts, off-take contracts, basically they bet on the projects to make that commitment they cannot do on another projects. So it's almost as heavy due diligence as an investor would do in a project, because this commitment is instrumental for the projects, but it's also blocking the buyer to commit to another project. So that's why the due diligence that we see is still very heavy. And there needs to be some joint knowledge and streamlining in the process to make it more efficient, but it's very much buyers driven.
Maybe just one add-on from our experience, the more data you have readily available that you can show to the buyer, the better and the faster the process. And this includes, like Arnaud already said, also usually due diligence on how a company is financed, which is quite important.
Thank you. Very good. So for the next presentation, I'll give the floor to Kauwid from Circonomy, who will talk about empowering communities and, I guess, smaller biochar projects. The floor is yours.
Thank you. A very good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to take this moment to thank everyone from my side and my co-founder Adrian for giving us a place here to express our views. I'm Kauwid RORA. You can call me KK. I'm co-founder and CEO of Circonomy. What we are trying to do, we are trying to convert the agri-waste into biochar by incentivizing the farmers. So what's the difference between what we are doing and maybe what Carbonfuture and Puro are doing? So basically, Puro.Earth standards are mainly for industrial pyrolysis. What Carbonfuture is doing, it's mainly the tracking and tracing and more of a marketplace, if I'm not wrong. What we are doing, we become more like a project developer, that too in the industry, in the artisanal biochar production. I'm not sure how many people are aware about artisanal biochar production. So it's mainly the low-tech solution, which I'll explain going further. So I guess we all know the current scenario. Billions of tons of biomass is being wasted every year in terms of leaving it for open decay or for agriculture, or for it's like field, it's like on-farm burning. What farmers are doing, because since they want to clear their field in the smallest amount of time, the cheapest and the quickest method they have is to burn these, it's like biomass in their field, because they want to prepare for the next cropping cycle, right? So this is the main reason, and the effect is, okay, we have a deteriorating air quality, we have a lot of GHG emission, but this is just one part of the problem which we see from our eyes. The hidden problem is the deteriorating soil quality, right? So what happens when you have this, so a lot of agriculture, at least in the developing world, you can say South Asia, Southeast Asia, is dependent on the rainfall. So when the climate change is there, the whole rainfall pattern is erratic, and which disturbs the cropping harvesting cycle, right? The open burning in the field also reduces the fertility of the soil, or you can say of the farms, right? So the world is looking at a huge food security crisis in 10 to 15 years. So what we are trying to do, so we all know solution, it's the biochar, we know since the morning, and the booth is here. What we are trying to do, we trying to do it on a very high scale or on a very large scale, which is possible through the artisanal biochar production, or you can say the Contiki method of the biochar production. There are various reasons for it. So as per few standards, the smallholder farmer can actually remove 1 billion ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, but they are not able to do it, mainly because of they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the technology, they don't have anything to monitor or likewise. I say that artisanal biochar production is very scalable and it's highly, you can say, deployable, low cost. What technology we used? It's the Contiki technology, which is, you can say, it's a cone. You can say it's a metal sheet in a shape of a cone, which actually reduces the emissions while burning if you are doing it right. Why it is scalable? Because it's low cost, low tech, highly scalable, highly deployable. It takes around 2 weeks to train someone and to start producing biochar. Right? In terms of, so you have the technology and then you have the training part, right? So the training part is as per what Ithaca Institute suggested and what Carbon Standard International standardizes. It's the biochar producer training which need to be given for the biochar producers with the Contiki. If you are doing it right, you can produce a very good quality of biochar with a very less emissions as compared to open burning or open decay of the biomass. In terms of traceability and everything, Circonomy comes with their own digital MRV, which is endorsed by CSI. We trace everything from the biomass production. You can say when the farmer is producing biomass, we know how much in how much field it is producing. We approximately know how much biomass is going to be produced. The biomass is traced from there to the biochar production, whatever is happening, and where the biochar is finally going. The end-to-end tracking is done on our DMRV. The one part which is I just want to mention that it is really customized for the people at the farm to be used, the people who are not maybe technologically well-versed or maybe not that much educated. So the tool is quite customized for that. In terms of, you can say, carbon credit, so everything is stored on our DMRV after training. We pass this on to the third-party verifier, and carbon credits are issued by Carbon Standard International, which are stored in the registry. It's like registry. In terms of all this, you can say it's like biochar production application. The one part which is missing, or you can say which is still a challenge for the people who are producing it with industrial solution, is the application part. So we, on our end, we are partnering with a couple of, you can say, research institute across India, and you can say research agriculture institute and research institute to figure out how much biochar to put in what quantity, in which type of soil, in which weather, if rainfall is there, if there is no rainfall. We are generating this very comprehensive data which would be helpful for the farmers going future, that okay, if I have a biochar, how much I should apply. And we have the results also. In terms of the projects, I guess we are almost covering 9 or 10 provinces in India in 6 months' time. We have a potential pipeline of 20,000 carbon credits for this year. In terms of, so these are a few of the projects which we are doing. In terms of the projects, I would emphasize one thing going further. So we have various projects in which we are, you can say, we are clearing the invasive species on the farmland for the farmers to reclaim these lands and use it again for the agriculture part. We are working with tribal people so that they can generate some more revenue. They can use the biochar because they are the people who don't have these chemical fertilizers and all. So these are a few of the projects, you can say. In terms of, you can say, scalability, as I mentioned, that artisanal biochar production is really very scalable. It takes 2 weeks to train someone. It takes 3 months or maybe less than that to deploy a project, it's like to, you can say, generate carbon credits, and likewise. This is a very decentralized model. Any farmer tomorrow, if they want to, so what Circonomy is going to do, maybe going further, any farmer, if they want to produce biochar, they can register on our app. They can get trained by themselves using machine learning and everything. They can start using our app. The app is inbuilt with machine learning features which can identify that, okay, if the smoke is coming or not, if the smoke is over a certain limit, and likewise. So in terms of scalability, there's a lot of scalability, I would say. Just one more. Can I go back? I'm not sure. So basically, artisanal biochar production has 3 features, which is the reason why Circonomy is right now focusing on the artisanal biochar production. The first is scalability, the second is the social impact, and the third one comes, which is the food security. In terms of, you can say, social impact, when you are buying a carbon credit from, you can say, from DAC or from industrial prices, you are just buying carbon removal. But when you buy something which is from artisanal biochar production, you are also supporting these people, or you can see these tribal people, these farmers, these smallholder farmers in some sort. You can say in terms of more revenue, in terms of zero hunger. There are so many social development. It's like SDGs which are directly focused or directly impacted through these projects. Yeah, that's it. If you have more questions, please let me know. And we have our booth just right there besides CSI, so you can come and visit us.
Thank you very much for this presentation. Questions from the room? One there.
Hi there, my name's Chintan from Capture. I was wondering, what are the main objections that you have from farmers? Like, how do you manage to convince them to even try the system?
To be very honest, when me and my co-founder Adrian started 1 year ago, we were very skeptical and we were thinking we won't be able to do it. But I guess the one thing which I really liked, and maybe Adrian can also concur in, farmers really do realize that the yield, or you can say the fertility of the soil, is reducing at a very rapid rate. In some cases, it's as high as 30%. So when we tell them that, okay, this is what you can do to clear their fields, and they can use the biochar back in the field, because what we do, we simply provide the biochar free of cost to these farmers, which they can apply back in their field. So they are really happy about it, that, okay, there was something which they had to burn before, now can be used something and can be applied back to their farms, which will increase their, you can say, it's like fertility or yield. And 70% of the revenue which is earned from these carbon credits is sourced back to the community. So that's why they are happy. They are getting more money. You can say the fertility of the soil is increasing. They are not getting fined it's like in some provinces in India, there is a fine if you are doing the crop burning, right? So they are able to avoid that part also. So all in all, to be very honest, we thought by the end of the year we will be having just 4 or 5 projects. But trust me, the thing is going very fast, and we have a lot of projects. We have a lot of interest. It's like coming from the farmers, and yeah, this is what. So I would say initially we just thought it would be a problem, but to be there on the ground when we started talking to people, we realized the reality was completely different. They are really happy to deploy some solution which can fix these problems and also help them to shift towards more sustainable ways of farming.
Someone else with a question, maybe? Yep.
How about the buyers? How do they typically react to these types of credits?
I guess both of these guys can comment more, but in our experience, since we are talking to buyers directly, there are 2 types of buyers. One which are directly or really focused on the carbon removal part, and they don't want any leniency on it. There are these other type of buyers who are really want that, okay, if they are paying $100 for something, I just don't be removing carbon dioxide, but it should also go for the welfare of the society, or maybe the social impacts or the sustainable development goals, and likewise. So they are both mixed type. Maybe you both can say more about it if you have. But yeah, this is our experience on this.
Thanks. I wanted to ask you as well, how does it work? Like, is it a shared infrastructure where each farmer comes with its biomass, turn it into biochar and take biochar back, or is it more like community batches with some sort of rules? Or
so it's like what we are really trying to do is a decentralized, centralized model where not every farmer is producing their biochar, but it's more like, okay, a community of farmers, maybe 10 farmers or 20 farmers. So we put a kin between 10, 20 farmers. They all bring their biomass there, produce biochar, and they take it back in the same ratio. Mm-hmm. And it's like apply it in their field, because it's like tracking something. It's not about only tracking, I would say, because at least in India, the farm holding is very small. Mm-hmm. So maybe if I'm doing it on my end, I might not have that amount of biomass with me. So I really need more amount of biomass. So that's why it's a decentralized, centralized model, mm-hmm. something like that.
Nice. Thank you very much for this presentation. I will now give the floor to Melissa from GECA Environment for the next presentation. The floor is yours.
Okay. Clicker. Thank you. I hope you guys will have a lot of questions at the end of the talks because, you know, we've just been sitting here waiting to answer them. So please drill me at the end. Maybe I'll leave more time if I feel like you guys are ready. So we've talked about general markets. Thank you, Arnaud. Dressed a good pictures of buyers and the process to get certified, at least through Puro. Thank you, Marcel, for also talking about the MRV or just MRV in general that, you know, allows me not to talk about it. It's more complicated and everything. And thank you a lot for talking about artisan as well. It's maybe a little bit less relevant to our talk right now, which is based on de-risking investments. This is as much on a project developer standpoint as it is on an investor standpoint. So we wanted to take the lenses of both parties. Oh, okay, yeah, it's aggressive. I see what you mean. So just general background on biochar projects, where they stand today, what do we see? So I think, there's been a good job at setting the table. What we have seen, and I'll introduce us a bit more at the end so you don't get bored at the beginning, but what we do see with projects that we work in, mostly in North America, also in Europe and across the world, is that compared to, let's say, 2 years ago, average project sizes are increasing. So it's going from small sizes where mostly it was perhaps pilot projects or smaller innovators, and now we're seeing that larger projects in biochar are coming along. We're talking about 10,000 tons a year, which is of biochar, which is a good size, but also to 30,000 tons a year. Projects are preparing for 50,000 tons, hundreds, and there are even a few in the world that are preparing multi-hundred thousand tons a year biochar projects. So we are seeing increasing sizes. Now, everywhere there is biomass. So it's spreading. Biochar is everywhere, which is fantastic news for everyone because the more people are aware, the more action can be taken, the more investments can actually be funneled within this space. We're seeing also more low-value feedstock come in. Previously, it was mostly wood biomass, bark, wood chips, sawmills, but we're also seeing now manure that causes a huge problem everywhere. Contaminants, there are new regulations as well. For example, in Europe, but also in North America, we're seeing a lot of ag waste that needs to be dealt with in a certain way rather than burnt, right? Just like in India. And what I really want to put the finger on is developers. We're seeing much more experienced developers coming into this space. So where we had maybe mom and pop shops, smaller biochar kilns or specific to a farm or to a smaller lumber mill, now we're seeing developers, ex-CEOs of large companies, people that have developed, successful other companies, other plants that are really coming in with this experienced background, and that's going to change a lot of things. Aside from that, what I will say is for most projects we work with, financing of one way or the other is a barrier. So we want to talk about the risks. When we are a project developer, how do we think about the risks of our projects and how are they linked to one another? I'm going to leave this slide for like 2 seconds, so feel free to take pictures, but you can take some more at the end. Lots of different risks. And they all play together, right? One affects the other, which affects the other, which affects the other. So how do we think about these when, as I mentioned, you're a project developer, but also when you're an investor and you're looking to diligence a project and understand, well, do I have risks in terms of timelines? Do I have risks in terms of revenues? I won't talk about all of the risks and how they affect each other, but there are 4 specific links that I want to make that I want to bring your attention on. Okay, so the first one is technology OEM and construction commissioning, how these two, let's say, risk factors interact with each other. There are a lot of systems out there. There are a lot of technology providers. There are a few here, or maybe more than a few. The truth is there are probably more than 150, if not 200 worldwide that produce machinery to make biochar. This machinery may be, it may be on the demo scale, but there are we follow more than 150 at GECA such OEMs at different stages that are looking to commercialize their systems. So there are a lot of choices, and they're all different. They have their pros and their cons, right? And what we see is they also have different characteristics in terms of timelines, in terms of performance, and in terms of the outputs. OEM and technology is one of the most important pieces of a project because it affects your CapEx, it affects your production, it affects obviously the quantity of financing you need, but also your carbon. Which methodology will you be eligible under, right? Probably how the technology also impact the carbon profile. So how much carbon credits are you able to output at the end of the day? And mostly, they impact project timeline. Okay, so there are some technology providers that can provide, the tech and say they can build it within 3 months. That's all great. I've never seen it so far, but they do say that. And there are some that have backlogs of, 2 years. And every time, again, I have never seen, I've never seen a project actually start operating the day they say it would start operating. Now, there are some that are closer than others, but in most instances, there are some delays that come from the expectations of the project developers for commissioning and construction. So that's a big risk when we're looking at investment because obviously time is money. And so one of the, most important de-risking mechanism that we suggest is to conduct quite a heavy due diligence on the technology and then the planning that's related to the construction and commissioning of this technology. Obviously, we conduct due diligences, so I may be biased by saying this, but at the same time, maybe we do conduct due diligences because we've seen too many failures. So, in any case. The second one I want to talk about is feedstock supply and how it is linked with operations. Feedstock with technology is one of the most critical piece of a biochar project. We know that, most of us know that, right? But in some cases, we underestimate how tricky it is, how sensitive it is. Too much moisture on one batch of feedstock that you receive, and then your operations can be very problematic on several months, right? So it yields operational challenges. We see, for example, feedstock that's not exactly spec'd as it was sold, so within contracts, can yield to, some issues maybe with tars because for whatever reason, it was not the way it was spec or contaminants in the outputs. And all of that has an impact at the end of the day on production, biochar, carbon, and profitability of a project. The other piece on feedstock is the contract length. So there are some biochar projects that move forward with feedstock supplies of, short term or wanting to buy from the spot market biomass. It makes a project extremely sensitive, and when an investor comes in, or even a carbon buyer comes in, they are, let's say, less enthusiastic if the ask does not match the feedstock supply. So this is a very important piece not to underestimate. So length and conditions also. We want to ensure that that feedstock contract is going to deliver what it says it does. Did it work? No. The next one is perhaps one that is most obvious, one that we talk about every year when we're here together on the stage, off the stage, in our conversation, is how biochar offtakes influence carbon offtakes. We have to place this biochar for there to be carbon credit generated. And so when we talk with buyers that, as Arnaud mentioned earlier, they actually conduct due diligences a lot like investors, and in some cases even more so. They want to see that the biochar is placed or there is a really strong ability to place it. So either you have very close links with buyers within a joint venture or through ownership of the company in SP, I don't know, or you have actually offtake contracts in place. Now this is the most difficult piece probably of the whole equation, and so it is the most important to put energy into. There are some brokers here that can help. I'm going to make a shout out to Biochar Zero and NChar. They do help out on the biochar brokering piece, and where we can help is mostly on the design. So if you're looking for specific markets, properties, processes, this is where we can help as well. Obviously, I don't mention everything we can do because then we don't have all day. And then carbon offtake and financing. So, again, closely linked. There are some financiers that don't believe in the carbon market. There are some financiers that don't believe that pyrolysis technology is mature. And there are some people that are way too enthusiastic about it and actually think that it's really, really easy to run a biochar plant and that, you shove it in the oven and then it's out and it's cooked and it's nice and everyone has fun. So it's a little bit in between that we want to stand. We don't want to think it's too easy, but we don't also want to pretend it's not easy. So I don't know if I confuse them, but you know what I mean. So we want to make sure that the two are aligned. The carbon off-takers are not necessarily helping right now. So if there are carbon off-takers, again, I'm referring to Arnaud because he put a lot of good data out that I can use. Please commit to longer-term off-takes. Because what we see right now is that a lot of buyers, they want the spot market. And then they knock on our door in Q4, in November, in December, in January, and they say, hi, I want to buy 5,000 tons of biochar credit. And we say, well, that's all fun and games, except if you had committed to it, a year ago, there would be probably 5 times more supply. So we're seeing this little cat and dog game, which is affecting financing because, as I mentioned earlier, some financiers don't believe in the carbon market. So if you're building a project with the intention of selling biochar or even giving biochar in certain cases, and you want to get an investor, well, a lot of them are going to ask for that offtake. So it really comes down to the buyer, in our opinion, and to the project developers to demonstrate to a buyer that they need this long-term offtake. Okay, I'll put the slide back after. It's almost like I'm ranting over to everyone, but no, I'm trying to educate everyone. So, investment needs. We are also seeing that there are heavy investment needs in this space. And it's not necessarily that this is the absolute truth. This is our absolute truth of the producers, the project developers that we've been working with. There is a big need for development capital to build robust, high-quality projects. So that they can go through, due diligence, they can get the support they need to choose the right tech to make sure the operation is clear so that they don't spend so much time wasted on delays, which costs even more. We've seen projects delayed by over 18 months, right? Because for some reason, the system didn't fit exactly what they had expected or entered in their models. And that would have probably not been the case. Maybe they would only have 6 months delay because of shipping delays, but that's not something we can help with. If they had development capital, okay? We're also seeing a need for debt and equity. This is standard. I mean, as I said, bankers don't necessarily believe in pyrolysis and biochar or the carbon market, one or the other or all of these. And well, traditional, equity is also getting into this space. We're seeing more come forward, which is a great news, but it's still very much needed. The quantity of capital that there is for the quantity of project, doesn't match. And then one last piece I also want to slide a word into is prepayments. You asked about prepayments, I believe, earlier. Everyone always asked about prepayments. A lot of people build projects with the expectation that they will get a lot of prepayments and therefore they can cover their own equity piece in their financing. That happens not often, okay? We see it in the news, but I want to make it my role today to give you clear expectations. It does happen, it can happen, but let's highly suggest not to build an entire project based on this because it will be delayed. It will take time. Just the due diligence for prepayments on carbon credits is as heavy, if not longer, than carbon financiers. So we need to make sure that the project and the developers, the financiers and the off-takers' expectations are aligned, all right? For the quantity of biochar projects, there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, getting developed as we speak today. There are how many prepayment deals that have moved forward over the past year? How much would you say? 20, 30? You see? So it's not at all aligned. So let's find capital elsewhere, and hopefully we can put a lot of efforts there, but we need people to mature further, and we especially need project developers and project to mature further and have demonstrated their ability to deliver. So This is I think the last slide. It's just it's a really nice visual. Obviously, our branding is green and black. So, but it's just to show that there are really, all of the projects are, aspects are intertwined. The standard is going to affect the offtake. It's going to affect the operations. It's going to affect the, construction. Everything's intertwined. So it's really important for development capital to come in, which is not something I have written, but it's also important to have really realistic expectations about how fast we can move and how much impact one aspect can have on everything else. We change pyrolysis temperature by 100 degrees, your model changes entirely, okay? It's really important. And I think some people, unfortunately, have seen the negative side of that, the flip side, where, the revenues don't match what they initially expected. So, and the second piece that I want to mention about de-risking in general is that we should focus on having offtakes for carbon of few years, 3, 4, 5 years. Generally, buyers are much more inclined to buy into this when you have delivered in the first year. Okay, so if you're able to go through with a project development, that's say a pilot, and you're going through a small scale, and you think you're able to deliver, let's say 1,000 credits over a year, go there, and with the right people, the right connections, we believe that the rest will follow. And obviously the folder has to be solid, but it will follow. Okay, so that's the way to go there quicker, if possible. Now, quickly, I talked a lot about, different aspects of projects and due diligence. This is what we do at GECA. We have a booth, G39. I have some colleagues there. Shout out to them for having come and made the trip. It was quite the trip for some of us. Not me, them, but what we do is development. We help project developers get into the best position, optimize projects. We also have some partners that can help with funding, but those projects have to be de-risked. So the second piece that we work on is de-risking, helping, again, the projects make sure that they can get to a point where financiers are, what's allies in English? Comfortable. Thank you, guys. Comfortable with investing. And also that the integration of the physical project with the carbon project is done smoothly. The other piece is strategy. We're building pipeline. So we have a lot of projects, and we're building pipeline to be able to scale, and also building strategy for these projects. There are some cases also where we work with OEMs, technology manufacturers, to look into carbon, and other people in the space. For example, some investors. We also work, I didn't mention this, but on the de-risking part, there are also insurance companies that are in the carbon removal space, specifically for biochar, that can also help de-risk. And finally, the last piece of our work is the ecosystem. It's, building awareness, it's advocating and educating, and with that also goes a big market watch. So we follow a lot of the trends, the technologies, the markets, how they evolve. There's 50 markets in biochar. They all have sub-properties and pricing, and the demand varies. Again, we don't broker. I mentioned who did earlier, but that's what we do. We're based in Canada. We have a tremendous amount of biomass, mostly forestry, but we work all over the world. All right? And that's it for me. So please, I warned you at the beginning, I'm expecting questions. Please ask some. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Melissa, for walking us through the web of risk in biochar. Questions, please? Yeah.
Good afternoon. Christopher Soderberg from Circle Carbon in Spain. Thank you. Excellent presentation. All those points, of course. On the one hand, we know biochar isn't rocket science. On the other hand, we also know it's a very complex web of activities that have to take place. I've been in the fortunate or unfortunate situation that I've had to do some financial modeling for large-scale projects in the global south. And the conclusion is basically that all the factors that you brought up, the time it takes, the timeline. One thing you didn't bring up that I missed, or you brought it up and I missed it anyways, is how an LCA affects the whole process, because that can have a very big effect on the final carbon offtake. But what my question is that if you do this modeling and you're looking for financing, and realistically, you're looking at 5 years before you start to see any money coming back into the project. And in those 5 years, the financing burden has doubled. So our conclusion has been that today, where the technology cost stands and the carbon credits stand, the only real source of possible financing is either through grants, government, or philanthropic investments. And I would like to hear your opinion if there's any other options available.
Okay, so the commentary, let's say, slash question, there's a lot to unpack from there. The first piece I want to tackle is technology costs. It varies, let's say for a same project scale, it varies between $500,000 US to $15 million US. Okay, so that's the first piece. Again, there are many, they do different things. That's very important to take into consideration. Yet when we run the models, the technology price is never the highest cost of a production. It's amortized, obviously, over a certain amount of years, and depending on the technology, less or more, but usually it is the feedstock price. And so if your feedstock price or the cost to collect it or the cost to get it to your facility, however that structure is too high, and I can't say what that number is because it depends on the rest, this is when there are issues. But you're right on the timeline. These are projects that take 2-3 years to develop, and they take another 1 to 2 years to build. So these expectations also have, to be in line with reality. We get calls on the weekly of people saying, I want to build a biochar project and I want it to run in 4 months. Sorry, but it's just not doable unless we're actually working on a decentralized manner in an artisanal way. In terms of the financing, we've seen people that make it work. There are people that make it work. So I don't see any of the booth, well, maybe Terra Fertilis here. There are some people in Germany, there are some people in the US. It does work, but you have to have very good la poigne. You have to have a very good hand on your revenues when it comes to biochar, if you're acting on this. The second piece is there are also co-products that you can monetize. We've seen, and we're seeing, especially in Europe, but more and more also on the other side, we're seeing heat being monetized. And that's a very important piece that perhaps without heat or energy, you won't actually have the same modeling. So I think Novo Carbo is a really good example where they've successfully done so and utilized this stream to make it work. So I'm not saying it's easy. I think I warned everyone when I said it wasn't. But what you mentioned is true. So in terms of source of revenues, grants, sure. But even as a Canadian, I don't believe grants should make these projects live. I think we also have to be increasingly careful with the expected price of carbon. When we're modeling a project over 10 years or 15 years, or even if it's 5, we don't actually know if the price of a carbon removal for biochar is going to go up further to 200 or if it's going to go down further to 70. I know people that say either things, and they're very reliable sources. So you probably want to go conservative on that front. And maybe that's also kind of what has caused some issues in the modeling. Yeah.
Can
I don't really have
about
other
this?
answers.
Sorry, that's me. Yeah, because as project finance person, I can't help but comment on this, sorry. But actually, it's a very good point. Sorry, it's taking a lot of time about this, but I think it's a bit of the elephant in the room, like the typical chicken and egg issue with these, numbers that need to add up, and then at the same time, the capital is not coming in a long time. So I suggested earlier this approach of walk before you run. So basically breaking down into different milestones and smaller scale technology with less good IRR and profitability, taking a hit there, but that is demonstrating the technology, the concepts, de-risking in many factors. For that, you can use different development capital that Melissa was bringing up. We've seen successful projects reaching out to family offices. That's another source of capital, because there are now new generation of this old money, floating around, and they want this new generation. They want to do something useful with that money. So I would look into family office. It's not really philanthropic, but a part of it, their portfolio is perhaps, or like higher risk. That's more speculative. They do expect a return out of this. So I would look in different sources and break down to different milestones once you've proven that, because sometimes it feels like a shortcut to go to the direct big scale because the numbers add up. You have the economy of scales, but then you may stay stuck for 5 years. Whereas breaking it down, de-risking and proving, it may, in theory, look longer step, but then again, not all of the longest roads are the best.
Yeah. I will also say that we're seeing quite a bit more of joint ventures happening with technology providers and or feedstock providers. That de-risks a lot of projects and also allows for more capital to pull in. I think RX is a good example of this.
I have a quick follow-up for you guys. What do you think? What else do you think we need to convince banks to start throwing money seriously at CDR? Because we've said several times today that biochar is one of the most mature and implemented CDR methods, and still, Melissa was signaling that it's still hard to get money from the banks for such project. What do they need?
So unfortunately, I'm a former banker, so I may have some insight about what is keeping them from looking at it more seriously. Their CSR or like sustainability department are strongly pushing for them to start looking more concretely into those opportunities. Well, banks have, highly paid people and high cost overall. The cost of due diligence is not small, so they're waiting for large-scale projects. Otherwise, just looking into small projects is money making for them. So basically, for project to scale. And the other part is the de-risking with insurances or private insurances. Shout out to Kita, for example, with the biochar, with who we work all together, that are looking into this delivery or credit risks. There are also out there as government institutions that have claimed that they will start deploying risk-taking capacity on CDR.
Canada has done so.
Canada has done, but all of the OECD countries and the export credit agencies, with the Association of the Burn Union behind them, they've claimed that they have a framework, but they're not really using it. So we need lobbying. We need, the corporate buyers to say that, okay, now we're doing our bit, but it would be nice if government could do their bit, because the potential to leverage public money with this private capital on a voluntary basis is massive. So for every euro used of public money, you may generate, 10 euro of private money. And the tools are there. It's just they need consultants, they need education, they need lobbying, and all of us to shout at their door.
Thanks. Thank you very much. For the sake of time, I would propose we move on to the last presentation, and please keep your remaining questions because there is then a lot of space for debate. So let's go to the last presentation of this session with Paul from ACCEND about decoding the dynamics of biochar carbon credits. The floor is yours. They don't have your presentation. Are you able to find the presentation? Okay, we need to find a presentation, so maybe we can go for another 1 or 2 questions meanwhile, if you want. Can you check them?
I have a question actually for Melissa. In terms of financing, do you see a big difference between like the US and Europe in terms of availability of capital for financing?
I think I think that there is more in terms of number of entities that are looking into it in Europe. And I think there's probably more in terms of quantity of dollars in North America.
Classic.
Would you agree with that?
Well, I would say that European policies to stimulate those new technologies is more grants and R&D focused, so the payoff are many years after. Whereas in the US, it's immediate with those tradable tax credits, which are highly beneficial and attract a lot of money, so projects get off the ground way faster.
I will say this also, for, I guess, people in project financing, again, Renaud, but people here too, most people know that it's much easier to get financing for more than $100 million and, you know, under a small amount than it is for $5 to $40 million, which is where most biochar projects fall into. So I don't know if you've heard, but this is definitely what we've seen. There are people, you know, there's private equity that say, well, yeah, I would love to deploy some $100 million into this, but everything's too small. So there's that too.
Any other questions from the room?
Hi, sorry, my name is Fiona McAteer. I work for Lebrun Private, and just on the whole financing, my question is about transitioning projects. So our company actually raised both debt and equity for Arigna Fuels. Connor's over there to my right. He is the commercial director. They're down at D15 if anybody wants to go down and talk to them. They have two 35,000 metric ton biochar facilities in Ireland, which is, as far as I'm aware, one of the largest in Europe and probably in the top 10 worldwide. But they are transitioning from a smokeless coal company to biochar for biocoal to ultimately biochar for carbon sequestration. And the struggle that we have, so our part is not just about raising finance for them, which we have, but it's also about trying to get them to the stage of you know, carbon credits, because they're still involved in coal and they're transitioning. They don't quite fit into the pure earth yet. Whereas we've spoken to companies in Ireland who have gotten kind of pre-certification with pure earth off plans. You know, they don't have facilities. And I guess I just want to have your feedback on those transitioning projects. And like I said again, if anybody wants to go down and talk to Arigna Fuels, they're in D15.
All right, I can take this. Yeah, I think, you know, you could be blamed either way as transitioning, like for financiers to chip in, but you say capital is not the issue, but still, in previous employers, we had issue with financing, you know, large utility scale energy companies that produce a lot of coal, for example, in Poland, but that wanted to invest in new solar plants. And, you know, there was the difficult question to use public money to, okay, should we finance those solar panels? They're in Poland, knowing that they're the biggest polluter in Europe, you can be blamed. Or then not financing their transition, you can also be blamed. So the conclusion, and that's maybe inspiring to those transitioning companies in this sector, was that the requirement for them to be able to get attention, I would say, here would be more to the buying side, to the buyers of the certificates, to have a very clear, documented pathway to the transition, that it's not just a plan, but they're like board-approved material, they're like, you know, whatever you can document that's formally demonstrating the actual plans are not just ideas, but they're actually implementing and have follow-up.
I think there's also a thing about, you know, people don't necessarily want to fund new activities if they're going to keep doing that activity, right? So it's not just a partial, but a complete transition, I think, which is, as you mentioned, wants to be demonstrated, because you say the word coal and, you know, people just run away. And the truth is, for certain activities, coal will keep existing, unfortunately, but yeah.
in this case, they're like the idea is that they don't stay in coal, that they transition. But the very nature is, most companies, as much as we'd love to, we can't just click our fingers and turn green tomorrow. So you can't leave behind companies who are employing people in rural areas or in larger cities. But in this case, it's in a rural area. So it's more just to sort of get that conversation going. Not everything can be pure like straight away, although that is the goal.
I personally think there are a lot of people in this space that are very idealistic, and they have this ideology that if something is to be green, it has to start off green, and so that also contributes to that bias. But I think there are some people like that contribute to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you want to encourage transitions, and you also want to maintain the balance with other projects, making sure that the characteristic and the certification remain fair. So it's a tough balance, but I don't see why not supporting transition. On the opposite, you have actually higher impact transitioning from coal than just creating a new project out of scratch. So I'm personally strongly supporting of that.
Did it work? Okay. Apparently we are good with the presentation soon. That's yours, yeah. Perfect. All right. So then, again, the floor is now to Paul from ACCEND to this last presentation of the session.
Thank you very much. My name is Paul Ferguson. Very grateful to be here. Very grateful that we now have the presentation on the screen. Also very humbled to follow 4 excellent presentations. A little bit about the company first. We are a Norwegian limited liability company. Started in 2020, so we've been in this space for nearly 4 years now. We are a LCA specialist and provider, and we are a registered partner company with Puro Earth. We also work as carbon project developer, and that means that we basically help biochar companies to get carbon credits and then sell carbon credits to help them finance their journeys. We've been working with about 20-ish projects in different capacities. There's about a dozen of them who we represent fully in the carbon market. We have access to a network of about 70 plus credit buyers, and within the last few years we've done about 140 transactions. And I want to focus the presentation on the brokering side. We work with suppliers or biochar companies here in Europe. Some of them are represented here today. Terra Fertilis, for example, Carbon Hill, which are a UK supplier, also represented here. Several of our larger producers are also in North America, and either directly or via other intermediaries. We've also transacted with numerous companies, and some of the beneficial users are quite well-known brands, as you can see on the screen here. We're coming at this from the perspective of trying to change business practice into a more sustainable direction. That's where the word ACCEND comes from. It's a play on the word accelerate, and to accelerate sustainable change. We believe that trust is essential. We believe that this is a technological thing to a certain extent, but it's also really about people. It's about buyers' trust. It's also about building long-term relationships with both credit buyers and also the producers. We like to get hands-on, so we're a company that goes out and visits and makes sure we can verify with our own eyes what's happening on the ground, so that we really can answer questions when the buyers come to us. When they have questions about carbon credits, we can relate pretty well to the people who own the company, what they're doing with the revenue, how they're making the biochar, what the feedstock is, etc., etc. Finally, another core piece of our identity, if you like, we're a growing team now, is this question of community. We're in this because we want to see something change for the better, and we firmly believe that the majority of the money should go to the people on the ground who are really making the difference. I've been working in renewable energy and in sustainability for 20 years or so, and from other commodity credit markets, you see a tendency that too much of the value ends up in the hands of people in the financial industry. Too much of it ends up in, the broking houses, the banks in Switzerland. We believe that it's the people who are actually doing the hard work on the ground that will do something in the climate question. So with that, thinking about the credit markets and the development we've seen for biochar credits, this is really coming from a point of infancy, but it needs to scale dramatically. Last year, just under 200,000 tons were sold. We sold a fairly sizable share of that. We see that this is growing rapidly, but really it's nowhere near where it needs to be. From our experience, we work with different kinds of suppliers, different kinds of biochar companies. Some of them are specialized, looking at high-value char for specialized markets like animal feed. They're able to sell that char at very good prices, but still the carbon credits are a valuable de-risking element. They're a valuable extra source of revenue. We're also working with companies who are very much based on solving a problem with waste, feedstock, wherever that might be. For example, in some of these projects for example, in India. We also work with companies who are already in the char and the charcoal space and have the opportunity to repurpose or beneficially reuse products in different ways. Work with a couple of companies producing charcoal primarily for barbecue purposes, who have now expanded that into biochar. On the buy side, then we work with intermediaries, but we also work with buyers directly. They can be put into different groups. Some of them are the more well-known larger companies who are strategically looking at this, often in alliances with other companies. And then behind them, there's a large group of companies who are looking to purchase smaller tonnages, but dedicated to carbon removal. And then, especially after the EICHLER certification of Puro, there seems to be an influx of new buyers. And I kind of call these the toe dippers, the people who are kind of like trying out biochar credits as part of a wider portfolio of carbon credits. And typically, because of the higher price, they're able to purchase a smaller share of the portfolio, but they want to do that because they're trying it out. It's a transition to something new, something better. There's no doubt that the scandals regarding some other credits from other standards have definitely pushed buyers into this direction. We recognize also that prices have stabilized somewhat. Blue line here is Puro's char index. Green line here is the average of the transactions that we've recorded over the last couple of years. As you can see, there is some variance. There's also significant variance between the different projects and how they're able to monetize the credits and the prices they're able to achieve. And I wanted to spend a couple of minutes looking into some of the reasons for that variance. Price premium is one element, and location matching. We have a lot of companies that we talk to tend to request biochar carbon credit. I mean, those who are actually willing to buy. We're not talking about companies who are looking to get information about prices. We're looking at companies who are interested in transacting. They're often looking for something which is close to their operations, where the co-benefits of the biochar are relevant in their market. So that is something which kind of adds a premium onto the price that we're able to achieve. We've also observed that smaller ticket prices, so smaller deals, are able to achieve higher prices. Larger volumes, of course, can negotiate more of a discount. And also there's a significant premium on being able to deliver today. And of course, these are things that biochar companies in their development need to manage and, as discussed, weigh. So some price scenarios. This is kind of our view, I would say, based on the current expectations and questions that we receive and discussions we're having. Prepayment is extremely difficult, as other presenters here today have mentioned. It's very, very challenging to manage the risks, delivery risks, to find available collateral in a project, to manage the time risk. But it's nonetheless doable. More doable are longer term offtake agreements where there is a commitment to buy, but and commitment at a price to buy, but payment is on delivery. And then within the next immediate few months or so, we're seeing prices sort of in the 160 to 220 range for various projects, somewhat develop on location, as I mentioned, also highly develop on availability. So to sum up, there are challenges, as mentioned. There are also colossal opportunities. Some of the companies we worked with have managed to scale their companies significantly based on carbon revenues, and that's really what it's about. Some of our companies are now ordering new equipment, which they've been able to finance with previous purchases. Others are planning for access to new markets, for example, different facility locations. So there's obviously a lot of opportunity, and of course there are pitfalls with that, changing standards, requirements, the time it takes to do this, and of course, as mentioned, funding. Some things which help in our experience is finding companies who are willing to buy credits in an increasing scale, so as production increases, so pay as delivered contracts, and also hedging strategies, so selling part of the credits up front in order to secure revenue, perhaps to unlock another financing stream, but then being able to hold some back and sell it at a higher price in the spot market on delivery. So those were the insights I want to share from our little company. You're very happy to come and visit us. We're at stand G41. Yeah, any questions?